We're going to cross back to the House of Commons now, where the Defence Secretary, Ben Wallace, has issued an apology to the LGBTQ plus community for their treatment and historic abuses experienced while serving in the armed forces.
With permission, I would like to expand on the apology delivered by the Prime Minister this afternoon for the unacceptable hurt caused to the LGBT members of our nation's armed forces by the 1967 to 2000 ban on homosexuality. It was not acceptable. It was not what the brave men and women it affected deserved. And for that, on behalf of the government and the armed forces, I am deeply sorry. Mr. Speaker, for hundreds of years, joining the British Armed Forces has been a career choice full of opportunity, adventure and self-improvement. One of the most fulfilling and stimulating occupations a young person can choose, but it is also a self-sacrifice and bravery. This morning, we have published the independent review into the service and experience of LGBT veterans who served prior to 2000. It makes for miserable and distressing reading, and it is only right that this House takes the time to acknowledge and reflect on those veterans who have shared their experiences with the review. Mr. Speaker, I myself, along with a number of colleagues in this House, served in our armed forces at the time of the ban was in place. I cannot imagine what it must have been like to join the armed forces, buoyed up by the great spirit of service, and only to discover to your horror that many believe you didn't fit. I cannot imagine what it must have felt like to have been hounded out of a job you loved simply on account of your sexuality. Nor can I imagine what it must have been like to lose your livelihood, your family, your home, simply because of the person you choose to love. Yet this was the experience of many sailors, soldiers and aviators over decades. And it happened here in this country little over 20 years ago. The report published today brings this experience to life for us and spotlights the hurt felt by those affected, and for that I am truly grateful. The ban was introduced in 1967, unbelievably after the Sexual Offences Act had decriminalised same-sex sexual acts in private between consenting adults. To add to the injustice, when the ban ended at the beginning of the millennium, the stories of those who suffered were forgotten and their records buried. Additionally, in 2010 and 11, in line with government policy agreed by the Association of Chief Police Officers, the MOD enacted a policy to destroy legacy police investigation records concerning decriminalised sexual offences, so that historical decriminalised convictions could not show up on criminal record checks of service personnel. I want to assure veterans that this was not a cover-up and does not mean that their wider service records have been destroyed. Mr. Speaker, I want to place on record my thanks and gratitude to Lord Etherton and his team for compiling this comprehensive report. It was commissioned in January 2022, and since 1,128 people have responded with their experiences, many in substantial detail. I want to pay a particular tribute to all those who came forward. They have shown tremendous courage in chronicling traumatic experience, which for many has been causing grief and groundless shame for decades. I also want to place on record my admiration and thanks to Fighting with Pride, especially Craig and Caroline, who for so long have held the baton. The testimonies make truly harrowing reading. They paint a shocking and shameful picture of a defence that is hard to comprehend. The enforcement of the ban became something of a witch hunt. The testimonies details investigations, invasive searches and examinations, degrading tests, brutal bullying, and in some cases, sexual abuse. One doctor who joined in 1984 describes how he had to perform a test for which there was no medical clinical basis. Some who thought they could confide in their chaplains were stunned to find their details were passed to their superiors. For those affected, their hardships impacted on every aspect of their lives. Reputations were demeaned and defamed. Commissions were surrendered and officers demoted by multiple ranks. Veterans who served with distinction, awarded medals in famous campaigns from the Falklands to the Gulf, were stripped of their medals. Mr. Speaker, we cannot turn back the clock, but we can make amends and take action. This report makes 49 recommendations. My department, alongside the Office of Veterans Affairs, the Department of Health and Social Care, and others across government in partnership with the devolved administrations and the charity sector, all have a role in delivering this report's recommendations. I know that many in the LGBT veteran community have been eagerly awaiting the publication of this report, and rightly so. They have been waiting for decades to be heard. But I'm pleased to say that since we received this report at the end of May, the Government has been busy working through the recommendations across multiple departments to ensure that we can come to the House today accepting in principle the vast majority of the report's recommendations. And whilst we agree with the intent behind them, there are a number we may deliver in different ways to the described in the report. We will set out these differences when we publish the Government's full response to the review after the summer recess. But I can assure this House that will be the time that we can not only deliver restitution and redress to the LGBT veteran community, but it will also be a time where we can make sure this House properly debates not only the report, but also the Government's response to it and its recommendations. This, Mr. Speaker, of course, is a statement today, and while I welcome all colleagues' challenge and requests on it, I decided specifically that the debate for the House should come to also give the chance to debate the Government's recommendations. I think that is the right thing to do. And while that may take the summer, I think that is just important that both the opposition and ourselves and our colleagues can hold me to account or my successor. In fact, already we have, however, delivered 6 of the recommendations today. And we heard the first recommendation of all was delivered by the Prime Minister this morning at the dispatch box. And importantly, we also set up a digital front door, which has gone live today at midday, to offer information on veteran services, support and restorative measures to those affected by the ban. I would encourage the LGBT veterans to visit it, to see what support is available to them now, and to stay informed as to delivery of these recommendations as they are rolled out. I'm happy to be drawn on further details and recommendations during today's questions, but as I said, I would think the House should have the proper time to debate and scrutinise those. I'm glad that today's MOD is a very different place today from the defence in the late 60s to 90s. Our LGBT colleagues are an integral and indifferentiated part of the defence family, making a fantastic difference all over the world. At the start of this month, our Minister for Defence Personnel and Veterans met LGBT members of our armed forces and veterans before they marched to London Pride. It is an occasion that has become a celebrated part of our military calendar. Today's MOD policies are geared towards LGBT issues. There is training for LGBT allies and thriving LGBT staff networks. There is no place for prejudice in the modern armed forces, though of course things are by no means perfect, which is why we continue to improve on our zero-tolerance policies towards discrimination. However, we should not forget that we could not have reached this point were it not for some incredibly brave people. I would like to pay tribute to those who have campaigned for justice over the decades, as I said, fighting with pride, Rank Outsiders and the Armed Forces Legal Action Group. Cultural change takes time, particularly in large organisations like our armed forces, but it can only really begin when individuals are prepared to stand up and be counted. Mr. Speaker, this government has shown it cares about righting historical wrongs. It is why we brought forward this review, and once we have taken the time needed to fully work out how we'll deliver recompense to this community, we look forward to the government being back at the dispatch box to outline those details later. In his preface report, Lord Etherton notes, survivors have waited for at least 23 years for acknowledgement of what they have suffered and for justice and restitution. So today is about that acknowledgement. It is about recognising the saddening personal accounts and the deep traumatic hurt that the historic ban has caused. It is about acknowledging the adversity they overcame. It is about celebrating the spirit of service they displayed, and it is about taking the time to acknowledge their importance within our defence family, serving or veteran. I was struck by one particular quote in the report from a veteran who said, "I don't feel like I'm a veteran. I've never asked for help. I don't feel like my service was recognised." Today we want to say to all those ex-soldiers, sailors and aviators, many now in retirement, you are one of us. You belong in our community, and in choosing to put yourself in harm's way for the good of your colleagues, your community and your country, you have proven yourselves the best of us. I say again to the veterans community, I'm deeply sorry for what happened to you. The very tolerance and values of Western democracy that we expected you to fight for, we denied to you. It was profoundly wrong. I'm determined as Defence Secretary and as a veteran to do all I can do today to right those historic wrongs so that you can once again take pride in your service and inspire future generations to follow in your footsteps.